You've arrived at CozySideAudio, where dreams begin with a story. Tonight's tale is here to help you wind down and find peace. If this brings you comfort, please like, share, and subscribe so more dreamers can join us. Let the night carry you, and let's begin. CozySideAudio presents The Vanishing Thread. Chapter 1, The First Knot. Kijinji University always felt like it had been built by ghosts. The Gothic modern buildings loomed with stained glass windows beside sleek digital displays. Bricks were worn by time, but corridors gleamed with LED strips. Beneath the clean, efficient exterior of Kijinji's main philosophy wing, there was an echo of something older, stone bones under synthetic skin. Shorin Kugasaki sat in the back row of Lecture Hall D, notebook open, eyes unfocused. His pen moved without hesitation, sketching the same thing over and over. A knot. Not a shoelace or rope kind. Something abstract. A loop with 3 ends. No beginning, no center. He blinked once, tilted his head, and redrew it a 4th time. The spacing was wrong. It always was. The symbol of forgetting he wrote beneath it, as if memory trips over itself trying to loop around the truth. The professor's voice floated in the background, reciting Kant. Only half the class was paying attention. The rest scrolled through phones or gazed out the tall arched windows at the drizzling campus outside. But Shorin wasn't watching the rain. He was watching an empty chair. Row 3, seat 4, belonged to Yui Mori, a literature student who always showed up early and read manga during lectures. She'd been absent for 2 days now. 3 was unusual. Her friend said nothing. Her roommate hadn't raised any flags. Because sometimes people vanish slowly and no one sees it. That afternoon, Shorin stood outside dormitory B, hand pressed lightly to a painted steel door. Room 616. Yui's. The resident assistant had left it open for a safety inspection. Nobody knew he'd slipped in behind the building through a window, silently like a shadow, steps so quiet the floor didn't even creak. Inside, the room was neat. Too neat. Textbooks aligned perfectly. 1 half-eaten rice ball, mold blooming across the seaweed. Phone charger unplugged. Umbrella still propped near the door. Raincoat missing. And on the bed, resting atop the neatly made duvet, was a single knot. Shorin crouched, sketchbook out. He didn't touch it. Not yet. The knot was simple in design, 2 loops bound by a reverse twist. But it wasn't decorative. It was ritualistic. Intentional. He began drawing. Visual residue, not placed with symmetry. No pressure indentations on the duvet, must have been laid gently, post-departure. Symbolism, 2 loops equal halves twisted once. Duality undone? Or mirrored lie? Then he stood and looked around the room again. Not for signs of struggle. For signs of absence. There were 27 books on the shelf, but only 26 spines had dust along the top. 1 had been pulled and returned recently. The Knots of Meaning by Tomoko Ishiguro, a book on Japanese folklore, not rituals. Vanishing with metaphor in place of blood. Motive may not be harm. It may be silence. Later that evening, the Booksmith Cafe. Warm lights. Old jazz crackling softly through speakers. The scent of cinnamon, damp pages, and drifting espresso steam. Ren Shibuya was wiping the same coffee cup for the 3rd time when Shorin walked in, soaked from the rain. Ren didn't blink. Looks like you got rained on by a thought crime. Shorin said nothing. He just took his usual seat in the corner booth and pulled out the sketchbook again. Ren leaned over. Another mystery in your ink? Looks like a bow tie made by someone who forgot what left means. Shorin paused. That was it. The knot wasn't tied by someone trying to represent symmetry. It was tied by someone trying to mirror it. A message from the missing girl? Or the person who took her? He circled the loop in his sketchbook. Inverted symmetry. Attempted reflection of self. Failed. Conclusion, she didn't vanish. She was taken and left this as a message. Ren plopped down across from him. You know what always gets me about knots? The tighter you pull, the less you understand how it was made. Shorin didn't smile, but he did add a quote beneath the sketch. Some things are only revealed in tension. That night, back in his room, Shorin pinned the drawing to the wall beside a blank grid labeled thread case. One square filled in. Below it, he wrote a date and a name. Case 01. Yui Mori, the first knot. He looked at it in silence for several minutes. Then slowly, he sketched a second knot beside the first, one he hadn't seen yet. A prediction. This one had 3 loops. 2 days later, another student vanished. Same knot. Same silence. But this time, the door was locked from the inside, and a message had been scratched into the window pane from the outside. I watched you watching me. Chapter 2, Room 6F doesn't breathe. Kojinji Dormitory C always had a strange hum to it. Not the hum of fluorescent lights or fridges or phone chargers. This hum was lower, deeper. Like the sound of a thought waiting too long to be spoken. And if you stood still long enough in the hallway, you could hear it pulsing through the walls, steady as a slow heartbeat. Shorin had stood in that hallway for exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. He timed it. Then he stepped into room 6F. Inside. The room smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something iron-tinted, faint like static. The curtains were drawn tightly shut. The desk chair lay on its side. And there, hanging from the ceiling beam, was Aiko Natsumi. Or rather, what had been Aiko Natsumi. A second-year chemistry student, track runner, lover of calligraphy and lemon tea. Her body swayed gently, not from breeze, but from some unnatural tension left in the rope. A knot. Identical in style to the one found in Yui Mori's room, but doubled. A mirrored twin tied around her neck and the beam. Shorin's eyes narrowed. It was staged. Perfectly so. Too perfect. Mika enters. The door creaked. Shorin. The voice sliced through the silence like a buzzsaw. Mika Azome stepped in, breathless, ponytail soaked, fingers still tapping furiously on her phone. She skidded to a stop as she spotted the scene. Oh my God, she whispered. Then very softly. Did you already solve it? Shorin didn't answer. He walked past her, crouched, and pulled out his notebook. Sketch. The beam, the angle of the knot, the fall height, the tension curve of the rope. Estimated drop angle, 83 degrees. Chair too far from base. No impact dent. Conclusion, no fall occurred. He glanced at the window. Closed. Locked. From the inside. Then back at the door frame. A single scratch. Tiny. Curved. Mika was talking again. Wait, you don't think it was a ghost, right? I mean, I wrote this article about ghost hangings and how they don't leave shadows and… Wait, there's a shadow, right? She pointed. There was no shadow on the floor. Because the light was behind the body, not above. But her nonsense sparked something in him. Light source behind. No shadow cast. Killer wanted the body to appear suspended unnaturally. If ghost was a motif, was the killer trying to invoke fear or mislead logic? Later that day, autopsy report. Shorin obtained a copy from a PI contact. Time of death, 9:12 p.m. Cause, asphyxiation by hanging, but lack of struggle wounds note. Full paralysis before death suspected. Injection site on upper neck. So she was already unconscious before she hung herself. Meaning the killer had placed her there, like a prop in a play. Night, Shorin's room. He drew the scene again. Multiple angles. Added measurement annotations. Then, using red ink, circled the knot type. A Kamijiro loop. A binding not used in Edo-era punishment rituals. He flipped to another page and began labeling. Mini Case 1. The room that didn't breathe. Not identical to Yui's, but weaponized. Staging suggests misdirection. Killer wants visibility but not discovery. Victim's roommate claims she was home when it happened. Door locked. No forced entry. No sound. Primary theory. Killer used ultra-low frequency sound or paralysis compound to incapacitate. Entered via staff hallway, unlisted on official map. He tapped the corner of the page. Killer may be escalating. Pattern forming. Booksmith Cafe that evening. Ren served him a hot black tea with honey and plopped into the seat across from him. You ever hear the theory, he murmured, that ghosts aren't dead people, but emotions that don't know where to go? Shorin glanced up. Ren nodded toward the notebook. That knot, you ever think it might not be a message to you? But to someone else who hasn't seen it yet? For a moment, Shorin said nothing. Then quietly he drew a second knot beside the first. Similar, but incomplete. Echo patterns. A dialogue through silence. Are the knots talking to each other? Shorin returned to dormitory C the next morning. He walked the hallway again. Only this time he counted the steps, then stopped at a spot in the wall opposite room 6F. He pressed his hand to it. Hollow. He stepped back, looked at the floor. A series of faint marks, scuffed tiles forming a curved arc. A hidden door. Painted over, sealed from the inside. And scrawled just above the baseboard, so faint only someone looking could see it. 1 knot breaks. 2 knots bind. The third begins. Chapter 3, Echo Hill. Most students at Kozenji University knew of Echo Hill only as a joke. A hill where your voice could echo 3 times, even when you whispered. A place where upperclassmen dared each other to spend the night in high school. A place older students insisted had been closed off after a student went missing a decade ago, vanished mid-sentence during a phone call. A place no one talked about during the day and even fewer visited at night. The map. Shorin sat on the library floor, books open in a semicircle around him. Historical topographies. University blueprints. Campus ghost stories archived by the Folklore Studies Club. His notebook lay open, filled with overlapping sketches of Kozenji's Northeast District. He had drawn 4 points, locations tied to missing students over the past year, and connected them with thread marks. A triangle. Uemori Room 616. Aiko Natsumi, Dorm 6F. Kaidojin missing 2 months ago. All equidistant from Echo Hill. Center. Abandoned performance hall. Sealed after 2011 fire. 1 forgotten corner of the city. Unchecked. Unobserved. Flashback. Case 00 Kaidojin. Not part of the active caseload. A music student. Top of his class. He vanished after sending a text. Almost there. My ears are ringing. No body. No trace. The thread had gone cold until now. That afternoon, Echo Hill. The climb up the hill was steep, the path overgrown. Shorin moved quietly, hand trailing along the rusted guardrail. Trees leaned in on all sides, their shadows warped by the descending sun. The smell of moss, copper, and old stone filled the air. He arrived at the top, a flattened plateau choked with vines, where the broken shell of the Echo Hill Performance Hall sat like a fossilized memory. Cracked walls, shattered windows, nature creeping back inside. He stepped through the warped frame of the door. Inside the hall, the air was colder inside, dead quiet. Even his own footsteps felt swallowed. Then he heard it. A soft echo. But he hadn't spoken. He turned. Nothing. He took out his notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and began sketching the room's acoustics from memory, pillars, speaker placements, deflection panels. Then drew a pattern of sound waves converging. The space isn't echoing sound. It's repeating memory. He stood at the center of the room and clapped once. The sound bounced 3 times, then vanished. He murmured aloud 3 times. And a soft female voice answered. 3 knots. 3 echoes. The threadhawker sees you. Shorin froze. He turned slowly, but no one stood behind him. Campus cafe, later that night. Echo Hill. Mika repeated, slurping her matcha soda. You actually went? You are so weird. But like, my kind of weird. Shorin watched steam rise from his untouched tea. She leaned in, lowering her voice like she was in a spy movie. Okay, this is real tinfoil hat stuff, but did you know 3 students went missing near there over the past 6 years? Different departments, different years, no connections. But one thing in common. He looked up. She held up her phone and showed him a picture. A graffiti tag spray painted onto a lamppost outside Echo Hill. A symbol. A knot. The same kind as in his notebook. Notebook entry. Codename, thread case. All victims found or vanished within radius of Echo Hill. Knot symbol predates incidents. Possible existence of ritualistic pattern or group behavior. Term threadwalker. appears in multiple archived documents, including 1999 poetry zine, a banned sociology thesis, a hospital patient journal entry before suicide. If the knots are voices, the threadhawker is listening. Midnight, Shorin's room. Pinned to his wall were now 3 knots, drawn in charcoal detailed. Yui's, Aiko's, the one from graffiti more complex. He stared at the third one long. Then his pen moved. Prediction. Next knot will be a triple loop spiral. Meaning, not a call for help, a declaration. He flipped forward several pages in his notebook and drew the performance hall from memory, overlaying it with the positions of the disappearances. Then circled the middle. Something or someone is waiting in the center. Rooftop encounter. A security guard found a strange object on the rooftop of the art building the next morning. A sculpture made of thin wire and red thread, woven into the shape of a human spine, but bent backward unnaturally. Tied to it with string was a note. No handwriting. Just a printed sentence. The next echo belongs to you. Chapter 4, The Raincaller's Theory. Kajinji's rain never came gently. When it rained, it was sudden, like the sky had snapped and poured out everything it was holding in. Water lashed across windows and sheeting waves. Thunder crawled down steel beams. And sometimes, if you listened closely, the wind whispered names. At least that's what Kenta Oshiro claimed. The Raincaller. Kenta was a student in the environmental science department. Quiet. Pale. Never removed his headphones. He had a blog called Raincaller. It listed weather patterns, odd predictions, and increasingly, dates of upcoming deaths. Nobody paid it attention until one of those predicted deaths came true. June 5th, one will fall under thunder. That day, a second-year economics student tripped off a 6th-story balcony. Kenta posted a single line later that night. The rain knew. I only listened. The university shrugged it off as coincidence. Shorin did not. Booksmith Cafe early morning. Mika shoved her phone in Shorin's face while he stirred his tea without looking. Look at this. Another blog post. This time he says someone's going to drown in the stairwell of Building F. Who even drowns in a stairwell? Shorin flipped open his notebook. Pattern, 3 predictions, 1 fulfilled. Motif, weather plus location plus poetic verb. If staged, must be someone controlling environment in proximity of victim. Anyway, Mika added, biting into a croissant. Campus police are doing nothing, of course. You should totally go check it out. He was already standing up. Building F, 11:42 a.m. The stairwell was dim, narrow, and unusually clean. It sloped down to a basement-level exit that led nowhere. The drain at the base was covered by a steel grate bolted in. Shorin noted the absence of footprints on the floor. Then he knelt, pulled out a folded paper and laid it on the ground. Kenta's blog entry printed and highlighted. June 9th, underfall. Stairwell F. She waits beneath the storm. The prediction wasn't specific, but it felt rehearsed. Suddenly, a voice overhead. A shriek. Shorin looked up, just as a girl stumbled into the stairwell from the top floor, water flooding around her feet from a burst pipe. Her shoes slipped on the slick surface. He moved fast, caught her arm just before she tumbled down all 10 steps. Interrogation, aftermath. The girl was shaken, not injured. Her name, Reina Midori. She hadn't seen anyone before the pipe burst. But something bothered Shorin. He'd felt no water dripping before she arrived. And when he went up to investigate the source, there was no broken pipe. Just a small device planted under the emergency valve. A timed sprinkler rig. He took it apart with a screwdriver borrowed from maintenance. Inside was a tracking chip. Raincaller, the confrontation. That night, Shorin found Kenta behind the greenhouse, crouched under an umbrella in the dark. You listen to the rain, Shorin said. Kenta didn't turn around. Shorin continued, but it only speaks because someone gave it a voice. He held up the tracker. Who told you where it would happen? Kenta whispered, they write me messages in water. Pause. Who is they? They don't have names. They only leave knots. The unraveling. Back in his room, Shorin spread out Kenta's prediction posts across the floor. He drew a circle around the weather elements, the language, the structure. It was all code, a cipher embedded in poetic metaphor. He marked the first letter of each post in sequential order. It spelled out, "I am watched." The predictions weren't predictions at all. They were warnings. Kenta wasn't orchestrating the crimes, he was terrified. A puppet. Ren's comment. Back at the cafe, Ren was shelving a book on coastal legends and muttered offhandedly, "You know, in some folklore, they say water remembers everything. Like it carries memory. You drown in the past, not the sea." Shorin's pen froze mid-sketch. Metaphor. Drowning equals buried trauma. If the killer chooses weather as a stage, it may reflect emotional recurrence. Pattern. Not just message. Memory. Final notebook page. Mini case 2, rain caller. Victims chosen to match past deaths. Killer uses performance staging. Seeks symbolism. Kenta equals messenger, not mastermind. Introduces thematic layer. Theatrical death. Connection to threat case likely psychological, not direct. At the bottom of the page, he drew a rain slick window. In the reflection was a knot. A different one this time. A 4-part coil, inverted like a reverse treble clef. Beneath it, he wrote, "These are not just murders. They're acts. We're watching a performance." That night, someone taped a single photo to the front door of the campus security office. It showed a sculpture made of yarn identical to the spine from Chapter 3, but now woven into a loop. The title? Spine 2, The Observer Breaks. And pinned to the bottom with red string was a message. Next, The One Who Listens Too Closely. Chapter 5. To Bind a Thought. There was a hallway at the back of the campus museum no one ever used. Not technically off limits, just forgotten. It wrapped around the restoration wing where old documents were cleaned, photographed, then boxed and locked away in acid-free shelves. Only faculty had access. Shorin had learned that didn't apply if you walked silently and dressed like you belonged. The not archives. He stood inside a long, narrow room filled with climate-controlled cabinets. Every drawer sealed. Every cabinet labeled with institutional clarity. J138, Faculty Memoirs, 1987, 1993 M. 212, Urban Anthropology, Ecomyths, Archived, T009, Disavowed Studies, Symbolic Cognition and Ritual Logic. That last one made his fingers pause. He opened it. Inside, handwritten notes, thick binders, and a single manila folder titled, The Alethean Circle Preliminary Framework. First Clues. He sat on the floor and read. Founded in 1999 as an experimental cognition group, focused on symbolic learning, memory anchors, and ritualized retention techniques. Believed memory could be encoded externally through repeated symbolic interaction, knots, gestures, spatial choreography. He read deeper. One passage was underlined. To preserve thought is to bind it in form. Memory decays. Form remains. The knot is the Arkansas. Below that, Stage 1 echo threads. Stage 2 anchor echoes. Stage 3 threadwalker. Notebook entry. Threadwalker equals not a person but a role. A person who sees and preserves. A priest of memory. He turned the page and began to draw. Not I, single loop, distress. Not 2, double bind, witness. Not 3, mirrored coil, judgment. Not 4, threaded spiral, retention. Each appeared in previous cases, in chronological progression. Is the killer replicating a ritual intended to preserve thought? Booksmith Cafe, afternoon. Rain again. Shorin flipped pages while Ren watched from behind the counter, lazily rotating a spoon between his fingers. You know, people say that knots can hold thoughts, right? Ren said. Like monks used them before writing. Each twist a memory. Shorin replied quietly, these knots aren't for remembering. They're for what then? Trapping. Flashback, Alethean survivor. From the folder, Shorin found a recorded interview transcript. Subject, Rika S. Former circle participant, they had us tie knots every day. Not just in thread ritual knots. Emotional ones. If we made a mistake, they'd make us start over with memory drills. They wanted us to encode everything: love, pain, guilt, until we couldn't feel it unless the knot was in front of us. They said memory without anchors dissolves. They said unbound thought is dangerous. New lead, not codex. Inside a forgotten book, 10,000 Meanings of the String, Shorin found a diagram in the back pages. Not an illustration, but a photo, a wall-sized grid of knots painted in black ink. Beside each was a sentence. I loved him. I hurt her. I told the truth. And under that, circled in red, he lied to forget. Connecting threads. Back in his room, he pinned up the knots again. This time, he labeled them with the phrases from the codex. The messages matched. Each knot from the recent cases wasn't just symbolic. It was confessional. Mini case 1, Yui, I tried to run. Mini case 2, Aiko, I watched and did nothing. Rain caller, I let it happen. He scribbled furiously. The victims weren't chosen randomly. Each left a knot. Each knot holds a sin. They weren't just victims, they were participants, witnesses, maybe even members. A new delivery. The next morning, a small wooden box appeared on the doorstep of the university library. No note. No return address. Inside, a length of red silk, looped into a 5-part figure-8 knot. In the center, a rusted key, old-fashioned, ornate. The silk smelled faintly of perfume and mold. Underneath it, etched into the wood. The next thought is bound beneath. Final lines, Shorin's journal. Thread case expansion phase. Knots equals cognitive locks. Victims tied to Alethean circles past. Ritual has begun again. My brother might have known. He paused before writing the next line. I think I was meant to see this. Chapter 6. Puzzle box. There was a rumor at Kozenji that somewhere beneath the library, there was a room that had no floor plan, no blueprints, no record of its construction. They called it the puzzle box. Some said it was a bomb shelter. Others said it was built to house banned experiments. But the most persistent version, whispered late at night in literature dorms, said it was a room that rewrote you. And today Shorin had the key. The door beneath. The rusted key led to a locked stairwell at the far rear of the library basement, marked maintenance only. No lights. Only the soft, fungal scent of deep concrete and damp earth. At the bottom, a small iron door, waist height, with no handle. He inserted the key. It turned, slow and stiff. The lock clicked with a sound that felt too loud. The door swung open. A cold breath of air brushed against his face. The memory box. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. Instantly, the silence changed. It wasn't just quiet, it was dead. Like the room swallowed sound as soon as it was born. No walls. Just endless shelves stretching into darkness, lined with sealed black journals, each marked with a single knot symbol. He ran his fingers across the spines. No dust. No time. Then he saw it, a journal with his name on it. Shren Kugasaki. The knot on its cover was one he hadn't seen before, a broken spiral, ends frayed. He opened it. Inside the journal, blank pages. Then writing appeared. Not ink. Not pencil. Embossed text, forming beneath his fingers as he turned. You forgot the garden. You forgot the fight. You forgot the scream. Page after page of sentences, memories he didn't recognize. Then drawings. Not his own style. Sloppier. Childlike. One image showed a boy him, crying outside a building labeled Observation Wing, Alethean Institute. He turned the next page and saw something that stopped his breath. A sketch of his brother Suki bound in red rope, eyes closed, a knot in his mouth, and underneath, he chose to forget. You chose to watch. Collapse. Shorin dropped the journal. Everything in the room shifted. The shelves groaned. The silence buzzed. His hands trembled. This isn't memory, he wrote in his real notebook. It's suggestion. False impression seeded through architecture. A cognitive attack. The Alethean Circle hadn't just created memory rituals, they'd engineered spaces that manipulated thought itself. And somehow he'd been part of it. Escape! He sprinted out of the room, nearly missing the doorframe. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air rushed back into his lungs like he'd been held underwater. The rusted door slammed shut behind him, sealing again with a hiss. His watch read 3:14 p.m. But it had been 1:06 when he entered. 2 hours. Gone. Ren's words. Back at the cafe, Shorin collapsed into his usual booth, pale and shaking. Ren wordlessly brought him ginger tea. "You look like you met God," he said. "I think." Shorin whispered, "Someone tried to give me a memory that wasn't mine." Ren paused. "That's what cults do, right? Replace your memories with theirs." Shorin didn't respond. He was drawing again. This time not a knot, but a building circular, windowless, subterranean. And in the center, a figure seated in a chair watching static. "I didn't forget. I was made to forget." That night, Mika called him, panicked. Someone had broken into the campus print room, spray-painted a message on the far wall in red ink. "The puzzle box has been opened. Now we remember him." Shorin stared at the message on his phone. Underneath it was a single knot symbol. The same frayed spiral from his journal. Chapter 7, Knots of Guilt. There were 3 floors in Kozenji University's medical building. And then there was the 4th, the one that didn't exist on campus maps. Accessible only by service elevator and a broken keycard swipe, the 4th floor had been sealed for over a decade. Officially condemned after a water leak. Unofficially, it was where the Alethean Circle had built its first experiment lab in symbolic memory therapy. The file Shorin now held, smeared with ink and coffee, had come from that floor. Inside, names, photos, psychological assessments. Project, Cognitive Conditioning Through Spatial Ritual CCSR. Children between ages 10 to 14 placed into controlled environments. Exposed to repeated pattern encoding exercises. Monitored for retention, dissociation, and empathy erosion. Shorin didn't flinch. Until he saw the names. The list. He flipped page after page until a cold bloom opened in his chest. One name caught his breath. Kugisaki Shorin, age 12. High pattern fidelity. Latent memory suppression. Refused final stage conditioning. Another name beneath it. Shibyu Ren, age 13. Compliant. Observational skill noted. Transferred to cafe environment for passive role insertion. The cafe that afternoon. "You lied to me." The words landed flat, without heat. Ren stood behind the counter washing a glass. He didn't stop. "You knew what the circle was. You were part of it. Why didn't you say anything?" Ren met his eyes. "I wanted to forget," he said softly. "And for a while. I actually did." The conversation that changed everything. Ren poured tea. No jokes. No evasions. He told Shorin that after his parents died, he'd been admitted to the circle's care under a cognitive grief protocol. He was told they were going to help him remember less painfully. Instead, they taught him to feel through pattern, to assign emotions to symbols, to let the knots carry his pain so he wouldn't have to. It worked, Ren said. Too well. For years, I didn't even know what I was hiding. Until you started drawing them again. Shorin whispered, "Why do you still work here?" "Because I like tea. And it's the only place where no one asks me to remember." Notebook entry. Knots of guilt. Not all victims were innocent. Not all survivors knew they had survived something. The circle wasn't destroyed. Just went underground into people. Shorin drew a diagram of Kozenji's core buildings: medical, library, performance hall. A triangle again. The architecture is intentional. Every space echoes the past. The city itself is a memory trap. The hallway of faces. Later that evening, Shorin returned to the medical building's hidden floor, using the key Ren had kept since childhood. He followed a long corridor lit by blinking fluorescent strips. On one side, a wall of surveillance photographs. Children seated at desks. Children crying into mirrors. Children holding string. All their faces blurred, except one. His own. Eyes blank. hands folded into a simple knot. Behind him in the photo, barely visible in shadow, stood someone tall, smiling, holding a clipboard. And on their coat lapel, a badge in the shape of a spiral. Mika's message. A text pinged his phone. Mika, you're not going to believe this. There's a performance being held at Echo Hill next week. First one in years. Guess what it's called? Photo attached, a flyer. Black background. No name listed. Just one phrase in red text. Threadwalker's Requiem. Shorin stared at the flyer, heart pounding. Then his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A message appeared. Do you remember the room with no mirrors? Attached, a video clip. A surveillance feed. Faint static. A boy, young Shorin, sits alone in a white room. He looks at the camera, mouth moving, no sound. Then the boy lifts his hand, slowly tying a knot from air. The knot glows red. The screen cuts to black. Chapter 8, Threadwalker's Requiem. Echo Hill was silent again. Shorin stood at the base of the cracked stairs outside the old performance hall, a folded flyer in one hand and a loop of twine in the other. He'd received no ticket, no message, no instructions, only the time. Midnight. And the phrase, "You were always meant to watch." The arrival. The doors to the hall stood open. Red lanterns lit the path from the outer steps to the interior stage. Inside, the seating area was full. Silent. But the audience wasn't moving. They weren't clapping. They weren't breathing. They were mannequins, dressed in old student uniforms, each with a knot tied around its neck. Some smiled. Some screamed. All faced the stage. The performance begins. No sound. Then a low chime echoed through the room, metallic and deep. A figure emerged from behind the stage curtain, robed in gray, their face masked in white. In their hands, a thread loom. They began to weave. Slow, deliberate motions. Each movement caused a light to flicker in the audience. The mannequin's knots began to pulse faintly, glowing red with each turn. Shorin recognized the pattern. Knot 4, the retention spiral. Knot 3, judgment coil. Knot 2. They were playing the cases like music. The dancer appears. Another figure took the stage, barefoot, eyes closed, wearing a student uniform. They moved like they were underwater, arms slowly drawing symbols in the air. Their wrists were bound with string. Every step they took seemed to trace a memory. Shorin could feel it. Not see it, feel it. A scream in a hallway. A boy shutting a door. A girl tying a knot with shaking hands. A rope in a storage closet. Water flooding a stairwell. Silence behind a locked door. Each scene was from a case. His case. They were performing his investigation back at him, as if it had been scripted all along. The note. Beneath his seat, Shorin found a folded envelope addressed. To the observer. Inside was a message handwritten in red ink. You solve what we allow you to solve. You remember what we let you remember. Tonight you perform for us. Attached, a single black and white photo of the original Alethean Circle members. There were 13 people in the shot. The 13th face had been scribbled out. Someone had written beneath it. You. Shorin's realization. He stumbled back from the chair. The mannequins' heads turned toward him in unison, slowly in clicking jerks. The dancer on stage stopped moving, raised her arm, pointed to the balcony above. Shorin looked up. A person stood there, watching, unmoving. They wore no mask, only a red coat, and they were holding his notebook. Ren's revelation. Suddenly, a whisper at his side. You were never just the detective. Ren stepped into view, pale, shaking. I think they've always been building to this. Since we were kids. Shorin asked, why didn't you stop them? Ren, because the only way to end it. He looked toward the balcony. Is to remember why it started. The escape, if that's what it is. A door slammed open. Mika burst in, panting, soaked from the rain. What the hell is this? Are these bodies? Shorin grabbed her hand, dragging her toward the fire escape. Ran didn't follow. He stood frozen, staring at the dancer on stage. Outside. Shorin, breathless in the woods, opened the envelope again. A second page was folded inside. He hadn't seen it before. It contained only two things: a date and a name. Suki Kugisaki, scheduled for reinstatement. August 4th. His brother. Alive. Somewhere in the system. Final lines, Shorin's journal. Thread case. Stage 2 unlocked. The performance was a memory ritual. I was the final act. The audience? Symbolic of something. Ren stayed behind. Why? Suki is alive. I was not the first threadwalker. But I may be the last. Chapter 9. The room with no mirrors. Beneath the oldest building on campus, the original administrative wing, lies a room no longer used, no longer marked. It has no windows, no lights unless manually triggered, and as the rumors go, no mirrors. Because the Alethian Circle believed mirrors disrupted the binding of memory. Because if you could see your own face clearly while recalling pain, you might resist. Back into the underworld. Shorin stood in the elevator, its lights flickering as it rattled downward past the third sub-basement level. The walls dripped with condensation. The air smelled of copper and paper mold. He had pieced together the floor plan from torn archive sketches. The observation wing wasn't designed like a facility. It was a ritual diagram. Each room had a symbolic function. Room A, reception. Room B, fracture. Room C, memory embedment. Room D, resistive dissolution. And finally Room E, no mirrors, where the threadwalkers were made. Entering Room E, he pushed the rusting door open. Nothing inside but a single metal chair and a wall of old speaker grills, covered in wire mesh. No cameras, no glass. But in the center of the floor, drawn in black ink now half erased, was a perfect looped spiral. A knot turned into a symbol, turned into a trap. Shorin knelt and touched the ink. A voice crackled to life through the old speaker system. The recording. Patient 0. Kugisaki Suki. Subject exhibits full retention of embedded loops. Shorin's breath caught. He scrambled toward the speaker. You are not the witness. You are the echo. You watched your brother die and you made a choice. Underscore to forget. Underscore. The recording ended. A mirror flickered to life on the far wall. It was not a reflection of Shorin. It was a video, a file. Surveillance footage. A child Shorin, no older than 10, standing in the same room. Across from him, Suki, older by 2 years. Bound. Gagged. Silent. A voice off camera, choose. And Shorin, the child, turns and walks out. Present time collapse. The room spun. He pressed his forehead to the cold floor, notebook beside him, his pencil shaking. He wrote, I left him. I left him there. The circle didn't erase my memories. I did. The threadwalker doesn't solve crimes. He binds guilt. Mika arrives. A crash at the doorway. Mika burst into the room, flashlight trembling. Her eyes went wide at the sight of the spiral. Are you okay? I've been looking all over for what is this place? Shorin looked up at her with vacant eyes. I was here. They made me choose. Suki, he didn't fail the program. He completed it. Mika. And you. I ran. The final revelation. She helped him up, and as they stepped out of Room E, they found a wall of fresh paper strips taped along the corridor new. Each strip bore a name. Student names. Faculty names. People on campus now. Each paired with a phrase. Watched and did nothing. Ignored the scream. Tied the knot. One strip stood out. Mika Sayonji brought the thread. She stared at it, pale. I don't know what that means. Shorin whispered, it means we were never just investigators. We were part of the performance. You too. Notebook entry. Room E, not a test chamber. A guilt chamber. Not equals judgment. Memory equals selective. Guilt equals curated. I was a child, but I still chose. The threadwalker isn't a title. It's a sentence. That night, someone uploaded a video to the university intranet, viewed thousands of times before being deleted. It showed footage from the performance at Echo Hill. At the end, a final image. A rope, knotted, hung from the ceiling of room E. Beneath it, in red, the final performance begins in 3 days. And a subtitle, Return of the First Threadwalker. Chapter 10, The First Threadwalker. The building was called The Lattice, an off-campus care facility under university contract, mostly forgotten. No signs out front, no website, just a brushed steel door and a silent lobby. The receptionist didn't even look up when Shorin walked in and said, "I'm here to see Suki Kugisaki." She simply pointed to the elevator. The descent. Basement level 2. As the door slid open, Shorin stepped into soft light and silence. The hallway was lined with padded walls. The air smelled sterile like rainwater and bleach. He passed a glass panel where someone played a violin blindfolded. Another room with a girl drawing hundreds of identical birds on the walls. Not chaotic, methodical. Each person was threading something invisible. With their hands, their eyes, their bodies. Then he saw the door. Kugisaki room 5F. The brother. Suki sat on the floor cross-legged in a white room. No furniture, no bed. Only a coil of red string in front of him. He was older, taller, paler. His hair longer now, tied in a low ponytail. His eyes calm, empty. He looked up when Shorin entered and smiled. "I was wondering when you'd come." The reunion. Silence first. Then, "You're alive," Shorin whispered. Suki tilted his head. "In a sense. What happened to you?" Suki picked up the string. Began tying a knot. One knot per memory. That's the rule. You leave behind the ones you don't want. You carry the ones you mustn't forget. "What knot is that?" Shorin asked, staring at the one in Suki's hands. Suki paused. "The one I made after you left." Shorin took a breath. "I didn't remember." You did. You just chose not to look." The truth about the Threadwalker. Suki's voice was gentle now. "Do you remember what the Threadwalker is?" Shorin. "A symbol. An idea." Suki. "No. A role." He stood, walked slowly to the wall, touched a red mark in the corner. It flared briefly, light pulsing through thin channels in the floor. The Threadwalker is the one who weaves the memory of others. They carry our sins. They perform our guilt. They don't solve. They endure. Shorin's hands clenched. That's not justice. No. It's ritual. The final performance. Suki turned. They're going to reenact it. The original erasure. This time with a full audience. Shorin, where? The Echo Hall. 3 days from now. 13 participants. 1 to bind. 12 to bear witness. And what happens after? Suki's voice dropped to a whisper. They'll erase Kajinji. Shorin stared. Not physically, Suki said. Psychologically. The way we were erased. They want the entire campus to forget the circle ever existed. They'll leave no guilt behind. No memory. Only a perfectly silent audience. Ren's involvement. Shorin, who's leading this? Suki hesitated. The one who was never in any photo. The one who trained me and then disappeared. The architect. Shorin's eyes narrowed. And Ren. Suki gave a long, pained breath. He stayed behind because he remembered too much. He's trying to stop it. But he's not like us. He can't thread memory. He'll burn for it. Notebook entry. Back in his dorm, Shorin wrote in jagged strokes. Suki is alive but not whole. The circle still exists not as people but roles performed in cycles. Final performance equals mass dissociative ritual. 13 needed. 1 to bind. 12 to witness. This is not a mystery anymore. This is an exorcism. The reversal. Shorin drew a new knot, one he had never seen before. 5 interlocking loops, open in the center. He wrote beneath it. Reversal pattern. If I walk the ritual backward, I may unbind it. Then circled one word. Ran. That night, a campus-wide message was projected onto the library walls. The requiem begins in 72 hours. Participants have been selected. The Threadwalker has returned. It was signed. The Architect. A final message flashed in red text. This time, the detective dies at the end. Chapter 11. The Architect. The Alethean Circle was never a person. It was a script. And now, finally, Shorin had found the author. The email. The morning after the university-wide broadcast, Shorin found an anonymous email in his inbox. Subject. The final draft body. You may still revise the ending. Bring your notebook. Attachment. A blueprint. It was a diagram of the Kojinji Theater Archives, a hidden substructure below the performance hall. A place that didn't officially exist. Shorin's eyes locked on one room in particular. Chamber Author's Well. He packed his notebook, and the looped knot Suki had given him. He left a note for Mika. He didn't expect to come back. Descent into the well. The entrance was behind the ruined green room, behind a panel marked electrical access only. Shorin crawled down a tight spiral staircase, past rusted cables and old bloodstains. Into dark. The walls narrowed. The air thickened. And then he stepped into a perfect black sphere of a room. In the center, a metal chair, a writing desk, a circle of lights overhead, and a person already seated there. The Architect. They were older than Shorin had expected. A long gray coat, thin hands, a voice that was genderless, polite, sharp as ice. I wondered if you'd arrive early. That was always your role. Shorin stared. You created the circle? The Architect shook their head. No, I inherited it. I only improved the ritual, made it cleaner, sharper, more memorable. Why? The Architect smiled. Because truth is insufficient. People forget facts. But stories? We keep those like holy wounds. The true ritual. The Architect stood, walked slowly around the chamber as they spoke. The circle was built to preserve traumatic memory by dispersing it, threading it into objects, spaces, symbols. The problem was too many tried to cut the thread. So I rewrote it. Now we perform the memory instead. Shorin clenched his fists. You killed people. No, the Architect said softly. I edited them. They gestured toward a wall. Suddenly, images flared to life, holographic memories of the victims. Aiko. The girl in the storage closet. The blindfolded violinist. Each memory edited, cut, spliced, made cleaner. More poetic. More tragic. This is your case file, Shorin. And your script is nearly finished. The offer. The Architect leaned in. But here's the twist. You don't have to die. You take Suki's place. You become the Threadwalker in full. You bear the memory, all of it. The shame. The crimes. The rot. You become the archive. Shorin asked. And if I refuse? The Architect smiled. Then we erase the witnesses. And Kojinji becomes a perfect void. Shorin's rebuttal. He opened his notebook. Flipped to the page labeled Reversal Pattern. You made one mistake, he said. The Architect's expression flickered. You thought I was the detective, but I'm the audience. And I've seen your whole show. He reached into his coat, pulled out Suki's final knot, the inverted spiral. He threw it into the room center. It hit the floor with a soft click. The chamber pulsed. The pattern reversed. The lights dimmed, then strobed violently. From every corner, projected images began playing in reverse. The dancer unraveling her movements. The knots untwisting. The red rope becoming string. Shorin's memories rethreading. I saw it all. I just needed the right cue to remember. Ren's return. Suddenly a crash above. Ren burst in through the upper hatch, bleeding from the shoulder. He looked at the Architect, then at Shorin. Time's up. They've started the final performance. You coming? Shorin stared at the Architect. You can't run the ritual without me, can you? The Architect didn't answer, just smiled, and said, Curtains rising. Notebook entry. The Architect, not a leader or director. No true beliefs. Only aesthetic obsession. Memory as cinema. Guilt as narrative. This was never about healing. It was always about control. We can still change the ending. Shorin and Ren flee through the service tunnels as the entire campus begins to change. Projected messages appear on walls, classrooms, and even the sky above. Final performance, 13 hours. Threadwalker must choose. And a final whisper through the PA system. 1 not to bind. 12 to watch. And then the curtain falls. Chapter 12, Curtain Call. The sky above Kozenji had turned violet. Not metaphorically, literally. Projectors across campus had lit the clouds from below, casting every path in bruised light. On the main quad, 13 spotlights burned slowly to life, one by one. The final performance had begun. The gathering. Echo Hall, newly renovated, stood open like the mouth of a great beast. Velvet drapes, black-stained stage. A single loop of thread stretched across the floor, drawing a wide spiral toward center stage. Shorin stepped into the light. Around him, the other 12 began to enter. Mika, confused, trembling, holding a sealed envelope. A philosophy professor, whose name had appeared in the circle's early files. A student RA with trembling hands and bruised knuckles. Ren, pale, silent, taking the seat farthest back. And others, familiar faces. All of them witnesses. Each held an object, a memory token. Each was seated around the spiral. The stage is set. Above the stage, a screen flickered to life, silent images projected from the architect's archive. A child standing in a white room. A girl screaming into a hallway mirror. A boy, Suki, tying his wrists with red silk. Then finally, Threadwalker's Requiem, live. And beneath it, not absolution. Shorin takes the stage. He walked to the center of the spiral. His notebook in hand, the final knot looped around his wrist. He began to speak, not to the crowd but to the system itself. This memory is false. The screen flickered. This ritual was built to bind guilt, to preserve it. But you cannot bind what was never yours. He raised the notebook. You built a narrative where victims become performers, where guilt becomes a spectacle, where we watch instead of change. The architect's interruption. A booming voice filled the hall, smooth, calm. And yet you are performing now, aren't you? All the world your stage. Your pain. Your confession. Your precious reversal. The screen showed Shorin's childhood again, but edited. Warped. In it, he was the one tying the knots. The choice. Ren stood. You don't have to carry it, he said. Mika whispered, let it burn. The 12 witnesses waited. The system waited. The ritual had begun its final loop. Shorin held the inverted spiral, the only knot never used. The screen asked, will the Threadwalker bind memory? Y/N. The light dimmed. The room held its breath. Shorin's answer. No. He dropped the spiral to the floor, stepped on it, crushed it. The lights blew out. The screen glitched violently. Every image began to unravel, video reversing, audio shredding. The spiral burned away. Collapse. Screams. The mannequins seated in the upper balcony fell apart like rotted dolls. The architect's voice flickered out in mid-sentence. Outside, the projected sky collapsed, revealing a bright, natural morning beneath. The spell the ritual had broken, and with it the threat of control. Aftermath. The next morning, Shorin sat in the sunlight outside the cafe. No cameras, no notes, no knots. Ren sat beside him, arm bandaged. You ended it, Ren said. Shorin didn't answer. He opened his notebook. The pages had gone blank. One page held a single sentence, slowly reappearing. Memory unbound. Back in the ruins of the archive room, a flicker of light pulsed from beneath the wreckage. A hand emerged, the architects, burned but alive. They dragged themselves up, picked up a shard of the broken spiral, smiled. Draft 1 failed. But I think I know how to make it resonate next time. Let's begin again. The screen in their pocket lit up. New project. The orchestra. Lead subject. Mika-san. Chapter 13. Unwritten. A week passed. Then 2. Kujinji returned to normal. At least it pretended to. A campus that forgot. The flyers were gone. The sky stopped glowing at night. The mannequins had vanished, replaced by scaffolding and renovation signs. No one mentioned the final performance again. Students walked past Echo Hall without shivering. Professors resumed lectures. The admin board declared an isolated security malfunction and moved on. But for the 13 witnesses, including Shorin, Ren, and Mika, something stayed. Something that would not unthread. Shorin's days after. He no longer carried his notebook. He didn't need to. Instead, he walked to places that used to be haunted. The garden where the first victim was found. The stairwell where he traced the knot into his own palm. The alley near Ren's cafe where projection lights had burned ritual glyphs into the bricks. Each location had been reset, whitewashed, normalized. But Shorin remembered. Not because it haunted him, but because he chose to. The letter from Suki. It came in a plain envelope. No stamp. No return address. Inside, one page. You broke the loop, little brother. The circle no longer performs. But memory doesn't need an audience. You can carry it however you want now. For me, it was knots. For you, maybe it's stories. Folded inside. A length of black string tied in no pattern at all. A message. Or perhaps an invitation. A talk with Mika. They met on a bench beneath a blooming persimmon tree. Mika looked different now, older. Not in appearance, but in how she sat, how she stared into spaces no one else saw. I don't think it's over, she said softly. I know, Shorin replied. Mika handed him something. A notebook. Her notebook. I started drawing after. Not knots. Just places. People. It helps. He opened to the first page. A sketch of Shorin in the spiral chamber, eyes open. Beneath it. You chose to remember. The cafe. Ren had started baking. I figured, he said, passing Shorin a cracked cup of black tea. If the past is gonna stick to us anyway, might as well give it some flavor. He nodded at a tray of misshapen, knot-shaped pastries. They were terrible, but warm. Final entry. Shorin sat at his desk late that night, the stars just starting to wink in. In front of him, a new notebook. He hadn't written anything since the spiral ended. Now he picked up a pen and wrote one sentence. This story is unwritten. Then a second. But I will choose how it ends. He looked out the window where the shadows of Kujinji's tower stretched into the hills. The city had forgotten. But he hadn't. Epilogue, after the spiral. Somewhere in a distant archive, a figure in a clean gray coat walked through rows of blank data servers. They carried a music folder under one arm labeled, The Orchestra Experimental Draft. Inside, the same cast. Different roles. New script. And at the top of the call sheet, Conductor, Mika Sionji. Thanks for listening. Stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next story.